Peace and love, everybody. This is Judah Son for Put It Out There TV, also known as PIOT TV. Hashtag Put It Out There. Appreciate you allowing me to take up so much of your very valuable time. Look, I had to do this. I really had to react to this article on a website, metisnews.com. This was published 7/4/2019, last year. It's new to me, maybe new to some of you, maybe old to some of you, but it had to be. We got to go in, right? So it says here, fake Indians rake in millions in contracts. Fake Indians rake in millions in contracts. Let's read this here. Says here, in a bombshell report, the LA Times revealed that white men, Europeans, in almost every state have been falsely identifying as Native American or paying black people to serve as the front so they could make hundreds of millions through government contracts. It says government agencies in almost every state in the U.S. are reeling after the LA Times dropped a huge story detailing how white men in almost every state have been awarded million-dollar contracts from programs designed to promote minority-owned businesses. Through these tactics, companies have been able to rake in more than $300 million. Moreover, the LA Times admitted that that figure is almost certainly significantly higher than 300 million. While the LA Times report primarily focuses on white men who had either dubious claims to Native American heritage or claims to be part of a tribe that is not officially recognized, other news outlets have reported on fronting schemes where white men used a minority figurehead to secure millions in grants. What are we looking at here? Basically, we are looking at something that people have been kind of quiet about. The reason why this is ironic is because had this been so-called black men and women who identify as the actual true aboriginals of North, South, Central America and adjoining islands, calling themselves Moors, Moorish American nationals, things of this nature, what would happen is, and may I add, even though there have been elected officials that have put out government proclamations stating that these Moorish Americans are the first inhabitants of the Americas and the adjoining islands, the Aboriginal and Indigenous peoples of those territories. Had this been those people that perpetrated these acts of pretending to be someone that they're not, this would have been all over the news as sovereign citizen stuff and, blacks and sovereign. I haven't seen an article, and maybe I could be incorrect. I haven't seen an article that has been written by the Southern Poverty Law Center about this. See, this is actual sovereign citizen stuff here. This is really what this is. But let's read on. Let's go on a little further, because I don't want to leave anything out. It says, regardless of which method they used, these schemes were extraordinarily lucrative and in many cases were tied to corrupt government officials. That's an issue for me. You see why that's an issue? This is why Moors, so-called black men and women who are claiming Aboriginal and Indigenous ties to North, South, Central America and the adjoining islands. This is why they have to get thrown in with the sovereign citizen stuff. This is part of the reason, because there is money at stake in the hundreds of millions, possibly billions, that European men who have been branded white, European men in America, which I don't care how long they've been here, are trying to protect and been trying to protect for themselves. So they've made sure to do the bait and switch, because in my time, the sovereign citizen was this European out here who y'all like to call white, so-called white man, flying planes into I.R.S. buildings, shooting police, things of this nature. That's who the sovereign citizen was. That's who I always knew. But they did this bait and switch, and now all of a sudden these Moors who are making claims to the land as being Aboriginal and Indigenous to North, South, Central America and the adjoining islands, and claiming and demanding certain rights that come with that, all of a sudden they're sovereign citizens and domestic terrorists. And it's obvious when you look at these men that they would have more ties to the land as being Aboriginal and Indigenous to North, South, Central America than these British and English and Anglo-Saxon descendants. Painstakingly obvious that they have no attachment to the land besides being born here in the last 200 years, 300, 4, maybe. Let's keep going on. And the government officials are helping with this. This is the thing. This exposes a lot. That's why I wanted to go into this. Let's go on back down here. I didn't mean to go up. It says the brother-in-law of Republican House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, William Wages, said he was 1/8 Cherokee. That is an Irish name there. Maybe Scottish, right? Said he was 1/8 Cherokee. However, the LA Times looked through genealogy records and found that all his relatives were white dating back to 1850. Yet when you have so-called black people who can go back on records from 200 years ago and show that they were labeled as Native or an Indian or Cherokee or Blackfoot, and then they can show that there's been a bait and switch to where they've been branded Negro, black, and colored, all on the records. It's there on these records. All of a sudden they get all this argument. Like, how is it that the world is fine with John Smith coming to North America, raping Pocahontas, stealing her land, her resources, killing off the Aboriginal and Indigenous people, now saying he's Aboriginal and Indigenous, looking like he's fresh from the Caucasus Mountains. But when a so-called black man says it, so-called black man, right? You're black. You're from Africa. Your ancestors were runaway slaves. But Kowalski and McCarthy and William Wages can say that they're 1/8 and nobody bats an eye whatsoever at all. Let's keep going. Wages claims to be part of the Northern Cherokee Nation, which is not a real group. He made more than $7 million through his company. However, once the LA Times report came out, his company refused to recertify under California's Minority Business Program. You see, this is what this is about. This is about money. See, because they know that as a Moor, as Aboriginal and Indigenous to the territories of North, South, Central America and the adjoining islands, and having your own sovereign, theocratic form of government, care what anybody says, how they want to try to replay and play with those words like that's some church stuff. there's money that's supposed to be, there's funds that's supposed to be, checks that's supposed to be cut. Period. But see, no, they have to criminalize you. See, once you start trying to shed their slave terms, their terms that allude to slavery, terms that they placed on your ancestors as chattel property, once you start shedding those and trying to go back to being yourselves and claim and demand rights, birthrights that are yours due to things such as jus sanguinis and jus soli, all of a sudden you have to be criminalized. You have to be monsterized. You have to be propagandized. They have to use subtle acts of war through companies such as organizations such as the Anti-Defamation League or Southern Poverty Law Center or one of these other Christian, Judeo-Christian, European colonial outlets being used as weapons against the Aboriginal and Indigenous people again. Because I know what my grandmother told me. My grandmother specifically told me before she left here that we never came over here to the Americas on slave ships. I know what my father tells me about what his grandmother was. I know what my grandfather on my mother's side, I know what he was. I know what his mother was. These were Aboriginal and Indigenous people to the Americas. But instead, we're criminalized while the real criminals, John Smith coming over here on his Mayflower, the $5 Indian, the real sovereign citizen, the real criminal, can say that he's 1/8 Native American. And then what makes it so bad, when you go on the form that everybody's talking about, the census form, right? You go to the census form. You got what, Asian, black, those statuses on there. When you look at Federal Directive 15, it specifically tells you that those are socio-political constructs and are not based on science nor anthropological fact in the first place. So it's fraud anyhow. But you're not going to see these trolls on these videos on these people. You're not going to see these Europeans making accounts on YouTube and talking about these fake Indians who've been stealing, because that's not what they're there for. They're there to antagonize and do agent shit because that's what they are. They're a part of the propaganda. So, again, this is Judas' son for Put It Out There TV. I appreciate you allowing me to take up so much of your very, very valuable time. I'm going to go ahead and get up out of here. Peace and love. One.